Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next Connect workshop. I'm Brittany Mangelson. You might notice that Jen Kilpack has been the one leading us through these, but she's not able to be here tonight, and so I am doing our little introduction. So these Connect workshops are a collaborative team with the communications team at headquarters, Latter-day Seekers Ministry, and the Canadian Church. And so I'm Brittany Mangelson, and I serve as the social media seeker ministry specialist for Community of Christ. I'm in Saratoga Springs, Utah, which is just south of Salt Lake City. And I'm just going to let Parker and Becca introduce themselves. And then there's also a new face you might be able to see in just a second who's joining us tonight. So I'll let Parker and Becca introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the topic tonight.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Parker Johnson. I work for the church in Western Canada, and with a particular focus on PR and marketing across the church in Canada. So I partner with congregations and mission centers to help address their marketing needs, website development, graphics, all those types of things. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
Hi guys, I'm Becca Loving and I'm in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I work for the communications team at International Headquarters supporting our social media efforts as well as seaofchrist.org.
Thank you. And like I mentioned, we have another special guest on tonight. This little collaborative team, we decided to branch out for this topic because we are going to be talking about copyright and online content. So this is something that we as creators, we create online content, but as far as the legality of it, we wanted to bring in the expert. So we have on David Davis from the Office of General Counsel, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say because these are some of the questions that we get asked over and over again, and we just did not feel overly qualified to answer them. So David, I'm going to throw it over to you to introduce yourself, and then Becca's going to pick up on some of the questions that we have.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Brittany. Appreciate the invitation to come in and talk with everyone tonight. And don't sell yourself short now. You probably know more about copyright than you think. And hopefully we'll know a little bit more by the end of tonight if you don't know already. So I'm David Davis. I work in the Office of General Counsel as one of the attorneys here, and coming to you from the Temple here in Independence, Missouri tonight. So look forward to talking with everybody.
Thank you so much, David, for joining us tonight and walking us through this topic. We really appreciate your time and your insights that you'll be sharing with us. So why are we talking about copyright? Why is it so important? And then what are some of the focuses that we're going to be geared toward tonight?
Yes, so one of the things I like to talk about whenever people ask, why is copyright important? For me, there's both a legal and a moral obligation to give proper credit to the creators of material. These people have worked hard to create material, and we need to recognize that before we just use it without giving them proper credit. And the other thing, unfortunately, is that not doing copyright the right way can lead to fines and other punishments for the individual, for the congregation, and sometimes for the church generally. So we always want to be careful about that when we're doing copyright. Now, that said, we aren't going to do like all of copyright tonight. Mostly we're going to be focused on just kind of copyright as it relates to online issues and activities. But if there are other things that people want to talk about, whether it's, using hymns or getting licenses for reprinting hymns in their congregation or other copyright issues, they can always visit the Community of Christ website at www.cofchrist.org/copyright-law. So COPYRIGHT-LAW. I'm not sure if that made it onto the website tour the other night, but if not, now's a great time to explore a little bit more of the website.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks, David. So typically when we have our workshops, we'll be sharing a presentation or sharing our screen. So tonight we're going to try something a little bit different. Brittany and I will be asking David questions about copyright and online use. during the conversation, and then we'll finish off the evening with some questions and answers. Feel free as we go through this topic to send in your questions through Facebook, and we will address those as we get to them. So we're going to start off by talking about using and posting content online. So David, what are some copyright issues people should keep in mind if they want to use something they have found online?
Well, I guess it would matter what they were using and how they were going to be using it.
Okay, so let's say, for example, that someone finds this really great poem online and that it fits perfectly with the theme for Sunday, and they want to print it out and share those copies with the congregation on Sunday morning.
So using the poem is going to be okay because we have what's called the religious services exemption. It's making the copies that's going to be the problem there. They'd need to get permission from the author to make the copies of the poem that they were going to hand out.
Okay. So let's say, what if instead of a poem for a service, someone finds this really great picture and a stock image, or just an image online that they think would look great on their congregation's website. Is it okay to use it there?
Probably not, unless they had permission from the photographer or the picture was in the public domain. They could be at risk of copyright violations by using the photo on their website. I think it's good for people to keep a general rule in mind. Assume all content is protected by copyright unless there's conclusive proof otherwise. Something is not going to be in the public domain simply because it's been posted online or that it doesn't have a copyright notice, which I know is something that some people have a hard time understanding. But just because it's online doesn't mean that it's in the public domain. And just because you have the ability to take your mouse and right click on it and save the target as doesn't mean that it's okay to use, because that doesn't absolve you of the copyright issues just because you have the technical capability of taking it off the web and using it in some other format. Unfortunately, we've had situations that I've had to deal with where congregations or a mission center were notified that one of the images they had on their site was actually something that belonged to someone else under copyright. And it was not fun for anyone involved to have to deal with that violation. And mostly it happened just because there was a misunderstanding of what images are okay to use and what permissions need to be sought before you can use that image.
Okay, so what can people do to avoid misusing images that they find online and they want to use?
Well, if you're looking for an image to use for your web page, whether it's a resource, presentation, one step that I think is helpful is to use the advanced search in a search engine like Google Images. So you go to their advanced search in their settings, and one of the search parameters that many search engines have is that you can filter those images by what's called, quote, usage rights, and then you can find images that are free to use. You could also try and do searches for things that are covered under Creative Commons license, which we're going to talk a little bit more later, I think.
So obviously we talk a lot, Brittany, Parker, and myself, about memes and using stock images, photos on social media. So how does this apply to reposting a meme or a photo on social media?
So there's not usually as much risk on social media. There may be kind of a fair use argument to be made of how you're using it, and it may not be in the same way as what it was originally intended. But there could be issues with posting and reposting a photo, even if you're doing it on social media.
Sure. And I would say too, one thing that we talk about with social media, just as kind of an ethics thing, but not necessarily a legal thing, it's always good to credit where you got the photo from. So if I picked it up from Latter-day Seekers, I just make sure in the caption to credit that I got it from them. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I think that's great that you want to give credit where credit is due. Just remember that just giving credit also doesn't relieve you from like copyright issues or things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So do you have any examples when it comes to memes or photos on social media, what you were talking about before?
Sure. So other issues besides copyright that you want to keep an eye on, one is privacy. So if you're posting a photo or information about someone and they don't want you to be posting it, you could be violating their privacy rights there, and that could be an issue. I often talk with people about there could be a child protection issue. So I know a lot of times we want to share photos at like camps and church events of the kids that are there and all the fun that they're having. And I totally understand that. That's a great idea. Unfortunately, there are people out there, especially with things that are posted online, that will actually glean information about kids in their area and use that to target kids in an online thing. So we want to be careful about the information that we're sharing from a child protection standpoint as well. And then there may just be general issues in terms of, obviously you don't want to violate any of the terms of the social media site that you're posting on and things that are there. I would hope that people are not doing things that are going to have takedown notices for hate speech and things like that, but you obviously don't want to do that. And also just as well, kind of staying in line with the Community of Christ ethics statement, and when it comes to social media and things like that, would be a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, so I see. So it's not just copyright. There are other things to keep in mind beyond the copyright issues.
Yeah, copyright's certainly an issue to think about, and it's an important one, but it's not the only issue. It is the issue that we're talking about tonight, though.
Right. Okay, so let's return back to that, to copyright. We've talked about photos, but what can you share with those who are wondering about posting videos or other online content on a congregation's webpage or a social media profile?
Well, first of all, I would note that the content found on the church's official YouTube channel and many of the church resources can be posted on Community of Christ congregations and Mission Center websites, social networking sites, without needing further permission. As long as it's being used for an official church purpose, a lot of that stuff is going to be okay to use. One thing to keep in mind, though, is there's a distinction there about things that are on the Sea of Christ YouTube channel, the Community of Christ resources, and things that are sold by Herald House. So if it's something that's sold by Herald House, you may need some additional permissions, because that's something that may be offered in an online format somewhere else, and Herald House would like to offer it in that way rather than just having someone kind of offer it on their website. Beyond that, I would always be careful about posting videos and pictures from other third-party sites unless you have permission to do so.
Sure, that makes sense. So what if someone in a congregation shot a video and agreed to let it be posted on a website, the congregation's website, for instance, or on social media, so like the congregation's Facebook page?
That would probably be okay, but I think that one of the things to remember is that posting a video shot by someone still needs to have their permission, which you said, but you need to think about what's in the video that they shot. So, for example, if the video is of special music or even of the congregation singing a particularly good rendition of a hymn, there may be some additional copyright issues. Because remember, there's certain music that is okay to sing during a worship service because of the religious services exemption, but that exemption doesn't cover filming, that performance, nor does it cover posting a video of that video online. So for that, you might need a synchronization, master, or a performance license, depending on the nature of your intended use.
Okay, so this all seems a little bit complicated, I must admit.
Yeah, that's true. But sometimes it just takes a little research to understand and make sure you have the right permission for what you want to do. The complicating factor and something to keep in mind is that one type of permission doesn't necessarily grant permission for all uses of that material. So you need to be intentional when you're asking for permission to do the things that you want to do or that you think that you might want to do down the road.
So, David, you talked about streaming worship services or videos in worship services. And I know that there are many congregations out there who are streaming their services or who want to start streaming their services. So what are some of the things that they can do to stay compliant with copyright law?
Yeah, so if you want to stream or broadcast your services, one of the first things I would say is look into securing a streaming and or a podcasting license from CCLI, One License, or another licensing company. These companies usually will offer a streaming or podcasting add-on to their existing license that covers a lot of the hymns that are found in Community of Christ Sings. Those licenses provide permission to churches to stream copyrighted music as part of their feed, so long as that music is part of that company's catalog. If a congregation or mission center then has an annual license already for reprinting the material, then it's usually a cost-effective way to just get that streaming add-on, and then they're covered for those streaming activities.
But I noticed that you said that only some of the music is covered in those licenses.
Yeah, so each company has a catalog of music that they have secured rights to offer the license. They usually will give you a list on their website of what songs are covered, or you can do a search through their hymn find on their song find, depending on the site of what's covered. And that's a way that you can check and make sure that the songs that you're planning to use for the service are covered and included in that catalog.
So what if you have a video or some other type of content? Would it be covered under that as well?
No, see, those licenses will only cover streaming music, but not videos. So if you have other content, then you're probably going to need to do something else.
So what would you suggest if there are videos or music that are not covered by the licensing service?
Well, there are a few options. One, you could obtain advance permission from the copyright owners to stream or make and distribute recordings of the services in which copyrighted works are going to be performed or shown. Two, you could avoid the use of copyrighted material altogether in what you're recording or streaming, and basically only use public domain material, or as we said before, material that the church owns the copyright in would be okay. Or three, one option that I've seen and heard used before is that when you come to a part in the service where there's going to be copyrighted material, you just go dark and you turn off the feed during that time when copyrighted material is going to be shown. Now, there are some churches that will fill that gap with inserting other content into the feed that don't have copyright concerns, or possibly providing a link. If say you're singing a particular song that's copyrighted, you can provide a link to that song that could be found online, but would not be the church providing that. And so it relieves the copyright issues, and people could still participate and then just rejoin the feed when and come back together with the group at the later time. I know a lot of these aren't great options and sometimes aren't doable in the amount of time prior to the service. So it's better to be thinking about how you're going to handle that early than leaving it until the last minute.
Okay, so David, I want to take us back to conversation about YouTube videos. We talked a little bit about that earlier. As you know, many churches like to use YouTube videos as part of their worship services, either during a sermon or a special element in the service. So is there any problem with congregations doing that?
Unfortunately, the answer is often yes.
Okay, so YouTube videos, aren't they posted for sharing? I mean, that's what I think of it as when I have my social media cap on. What would your response to that be?
So yes, they're posted on YouTube's site and often for sharing, but it's subject to the rules of YouTube, just as the user, as we as users of YouTube agree to use the videos in ways that comply with the terms of service. Now, people may not be familiar with that. I have as a lawyer, often, I won't say that I love reading it, but that's basically the list of the long legal stuff that most people don't read, but just click I accept whenever you join a site. That's the terms of service. You can still look at it and find it on the site, even if you've gone past it. But one of those terms of service for YouTube is that the user is going to view the videos for quote personal use.
Okay.
So sitting
Yeah.
at home or at the office or posting, that is okay. But when you start showing that to a group, you're getting outside of personal use and how you're using YouTube.
I see. Okay. So if showing YouTube videos is a copyright problem, then why are so many people doing it?
Well, first of all, some groups may take appropriate steps to actually have permission to do it, and so are okay to do it. And honestly, others are doing it likely because there isn't someone in the audience that's objecting to them doing it, and they don't realize what they're doing is a problem.
Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. So there are always ways are there any ways that you could show a YouTube video at church and it is okay?
Yeah, I think so. Again, you could try and get permission from the person that posted the video. Obviously, sometimes that can be difficult depending on whether someone is reachable who's posted the video and you have their contact information. But you also should be a little careful about that, because if the video contains copyrighted material that person didn't have permission to post in their video, then you could be at risk of a secondary copyright violation. So it's a bad sign if the video you just showed at church last Sunday just went dark because they had a takedown notice from the user on the other end, right? So be careful even if you have permission from the user on that. But the other thing to remember is that one source of content that should be good to use is, again, the Sea of Christ YouTube channel. It's content that can be used for official church purposes, and that includes worship services for congregations and mission centers, camps, and whatever the Community of Christ is doing. The other thing that you could do is search for videos covered by a Creative Commons license or a similar license to that.
Okay, perfect. I want to ask a question about Creative Commons, but first, before I do that, the YouTube videos on our Community of Christ channel are, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are also on seaofchrist.org. And for those of you who joined us on Tuesday, we talked about how once you jump on seaofchrist.org, you can find a video that you like. You're more than welcome to use those. And we provide a download link on seaofchrist.org to those videos. So if you're in a spot where you don't have Wi-Fi access, you can easily share those videos that way. So back to copyright and Creative Commons. Can you tell me what a Creative Commons license is?
Yeah, so Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization that has actually developed licenses that allow anyone to use, share, and sometimes adapt a copywriter's creative work without needing any additional permission. So the copyright owner has already given permission for the content to be used, but you have to do it according to the type of Creative Commons license that applies to that material. There are particular terms and conditions for particular licenses. So for example, as we talked about before, one of the most common ones is giving credit to the copyright owner when you're going to use their work. So that's a fairly common Creative Commons license type. Other types could be one that's called share alike. With a share alike content that's a share alike license, you can use it, remix it, build on the work, so long as the new work that you share is under the same type of license. So whatever you do has to also be shared under a share alike license. There's also one called no derivatives, where work can be shared, but it has to be passed on in exactly the same format and without changes. Maybe not the same format, but it has to be in whole and without changes from the original work. So you can't do a whole lot of mixing and changing the work. Under a no derivatives, you could share it, but you'd have to do it as the creator had made it. And then one of the other things that's really nice for us in the religious and nonprofit sectors is a non-commercial license, which basically means that the work can be used or shared for any non-commercial purpose. So as long as you're not making a profit on it, you can use that work in the way that you want to on it. So you got to kind of, like, sometimes there's more of those licenses that work together, and you have to keep that in mind. But it's a really great way to use content with creators who want to say, look, go ahead and use it, and we want you to do that. But you should be okay as long as you're staying within those parameters. So one of the things you can do if you're looking for a YouTube video, for example, is search for a person, thing, or phrase, and then just, instead of just put a comma with the phrase Creative Commons, so CREATIVECOMMONS, all one word, no spaces before or after the comma, and that will help pull up videos that are under the Creative Commons license. You can also search for something in the YouTube search bar, and then when the results pop up, there should be a button underneath the search bar that says filter on it. If you click on the filter button, then one of the things you can click on under the features column is called Creative Commons. And by clicking on that should limit your search to just Creative Commons videos.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, there are some licenses that will let you use videos even if they're from YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would someone's one license or CVLI license work too in this instance?
No, those are licenses for different rights. So one license allows you to reprint music or possibly stream music if you have that add-on. The CVLI license is a video license that allows churches to show videos. But its catalog is mostly clips from major motion picture studios, and it doesn't usually cover YouTube videos. But it could be another option to look at, though, if congregations want to use video content in services, because the CVLI license does come with access to many movie clips that can be used under that license to illustrate a point in a sermon or to be incorporated in other ways.
Okay. I'm hoping that we can maybe shift gears away from copyright just for a second to talk about photo release forms, mostly because I know in the communications team, we get lots of questions about photo release forms, and I'm sure the Office of General Counsel does as well. And I would really love it if you could provide us with some guidance in that topic. So when and how often should photo release forms be used?
Yeah, I hear you, Becca. We do get that question quite often, so I'm glad you brought it up. So if a congregation streaming their services or wants to post pictures of their events online, then I think it's a good idea to think about using photo releases. Especially maybe having a performer or a speaker sign a release that says they give their permission for their image and likeness to be used. It's a clear way to document that it's okay to use that video or picture. Now, obviously, the terms and conditions in the release matter, so make sure you plan to use the video or picture in a way that's covered by the release.
Okay, so obviously having people participate in a service is a good idea, but would you need to do a photo release form for that for each service, or could you have a release that covers multiple services? How does that work?
Well, depending on how the release is written, I don't think you need to get one signed for every individual service. Many times the release could last for a longer period rather than just one service. But that would likely be more of a case-by-case decision. So it's hard to say what fits in every circumstance. But in either case, if you're going to get a release signed, then the congregation should be keeping a copy of those releases for their records.
Okay. So what about those that are simply attending the service, not participating in the service? It seems like it's a little bit of overkill to make everyone in the audience sign a photo release. So in that case, if they do show up in the picture or video, I mean, do they need to sign a photo release form as well?
No, I'm not sure it's necessary to get releases from everyone in the audience at each event. If you wanted to be safe, maybe you do that, but I think that one alternative is to have a photo policy for the congregation, which would notify people that the congregation streams its services and or takes photos during the event. And I would say this policy should be well advertised so that people get appropriate notice. And it also should include a way for people to opt out if they are uncomfortable with their image being used, and make sure that they understand what's the way to do that. So oftentimes they would need to contact a church leader or who they would need to get in contact with.
Sure.
And remember that not everyone will know just because you say you need to contact Pastor Jones. Some guests don't know who Pastor Jones is. And so
Right.
being clear about what's the process so that if somebody walks in and says, I don't want my picture taken, and there's a variety of reasons why they may not want to, that they have a way to voice that and we can respect their wishes on that.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And that reminds me too. So we should mention while we're talking about photo release forms that we do have sample photo release forms on seaofchrist.org. So you can find those at seaofchrist.org/communications. And in addition to the photo release forms that we have there, we also have a document called Social Media Guidelines. And the communications team worked with the Office of General Counsel to draft some sections of that document. And at the very end of that document, it includes a little bit of information about photo release forms, and then also some sample language that could be used to inform members of a congregation that there will be a recording or photos taken, and those could be posted on a website or social media. So there's some language to refer to if interested or needed. Okay, so back to our conversation. What if the photo or video that is being shot on someone's phone in the audience and not by someone on behalf of the congregation?
Well, that's a good question. So we can't always control what everyone in the audience is going to do, obviously. And so this is really kind of more of an individual or personal issue than a church issue. The congregation's not likely to be liable for that photo or video shot by an individual. unless they go ahead and post it in a church publication or on one of their social media outlets. So if we take someone's photo or video and we repost it, then we do become at risk of creating the issues, even if we weren't the ones that shot it in the first place. So for the individual, though, I mean, they have the right to take their own photo and do what they want with it. Taking photos or videos of others could raise issues, as we've talked about before. So whether it's with a camera or a phone, it's usually a good idea to ask someone if it's okay to take their photo before doing so, and respecting their wishes if they say they don't want you to.
Right, absolutely. I think those are all of the questions that Brittany and I had for you, David. We're going to jump into the Q&A session. So if you're joining us live on Facebook and you have any questions for David about copyright issues or photo release forms, feel free to post those in the comments. And while they are working on that, David, do you have any additional comments, thoughts you want to share before we jump into the Q&A that Parker's going to moderate for us?
Just a reminder, if we don't get to your question tonight, or if you're looking for more information, we do have quite a bit of information about intellectual property topics, a lot of that we've talked about tonight, but even some of the broader ones that we mentioned earlier, related to copyright and trademarks that are on the Community of Christ website at www.cofchrist.org/copyright-law. Or they can always send an email to the Office of General Counsel at legalservices@cofchrist.org, and we will try and answer them if we don't get to them tonight.
Okay, Parker, we're going to hand it off to you. Did we have any questions come through?
We have lots of questions. So I'm going to go in the order that they came. And I've mentioned in the chat, in the comments, that, you know, if we don't get to them, we've got that email address and the URL you just gave, David. But we'll do our best. So from Linda Stanbridge, what about images from services like Canva or Adobe? And David, Canva is like you can create graphics. It's a drag and drop kind of meme creator, infographics type generator.
So I think I'm not overly familiar with kind of what the permissions are related to that of those programs, but I would say you probably want to just keep that in mind. So if it has like some terms and conditions about how you use that, you want to be compliant with how that's doing. And just on a personal note, thanks for joining us, Linda. It's good to see a former seminarian who's joined us tonight here.
She also wrote that she loves David earlier. So. From Brianna Potts, she's asking if I create a biography page for any content that I use, is that allowable? And I think maybe that means like to attach with the program for that service or something like that to acknowledge, I'm kind of assuming here, but to acknowledge the artist or the author or things like that.
So that might be good, but remember, just giving credit is not necessarily get you beyond if you don't have sort of permission to use the materials. So it's certainly great to give credit even through a biography that you're attaching to the service, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have permission to use the material. So you'd either need to be under a copyright exception, or have a license, or have permission from the copyright owner to be able to use it in a service, depending on how you're going to be using it. So, you know, if say you're singing a song and you put a biography of the person that wrote the song in there, you still have the ability to use it under the religious services exemption, and so that's fine. But if you're printing the poem that we talked about earlier in the handout, just putting the biography of the poet in there doesn't mean that you don't have to get permission to be able to make copies of the poem.
Okay, good feedback there. This may have been addressed earlier, but Leon Berg is asking about what about projecting YouTube videos up on the screen? So I guess that would mean just in the room, not being streamed, that you're just only projecting into the room.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the reality is what we talked about earlier applies whether or not you're streaming the YouTube videos. So even if you're just doing it in the room, I think there's some problems with doing it, and would encourage people to get permission before doing it. It may be that depending on the video, that can be a case-by-case thing, because there's always like a fair use exemption and things like that might apply. But I would say I would encourage people to be careful about using YouTube videos in your services unless you've got permission to do that, or something that or it's a Creative Commons, as we talked about before, in which case, as long as you're doing it in the right way, you're fine.
Okay. This is going back to your comment about using advanced search functions in search engines like Google. Leandro Palacios is asking, could you explain the difference between labeled for reuse with modification, labeled for non-commercial reuse, and labeled for non-commercial reuse with modification? Those are for everybody else, that's the options that you'll see when you're in the advanced Google search function to try to find the copyright-free images in the image search. So those are the categories that tend to pop up.
Yeah, so I think in some ways those would be similar to what we were talking about in terms of like categories of Creative Commons license. So I don't have them sitting in front of me. But labeled for reuse probably means that the copyright owner has said it's okay to reuse. For reuse for non-commercial purposes means so long as you're not doing it for a profit, you're probably okay to use those things. That would be my guess as to kind of what those different categories are referring to, are those types of ways that you can reuse it. So think of it as you're searching for things that are labeled for reuse. So what were the other three categories that you said that he was asking about, Parker?
So labeled for reuse, labeled for reuse with modification, and then there's labeled for non-commercial reuse, and then the same with modification.
Yeah, so labeled for reuse is probably going to be the broadest there. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. For reuse without modification means you can't make changes to it. So you could use it as it is, but you couldn't make changes to it. And for non-commercial use, then obviously means you're not making a profit with it. So and then the most strict there obviously is non-commercial, no modifications, means as long you can't make changes to it, and you're not able to, and you can't make a profit from the use that you're making out of it.
Very good. Ashley Sabri is asking, where is a good place to go to find out if you need some sort of permission or license to post videos of your congregation or mission center singing or playing songs? With the new hymn book, is there one specific catalog, and is it needed for the hymn book?
Yeah, so again, hi Ashley, good to see you on here. I think one of the things you could do, I believe it's on the hymn page on the website, Becca, if I'm not mistaken. It has a spreadsheet that goes through Community of Christ Sings and kind of lays out which are copyrighted hymns and which are public domain, that kind of information. I would say I find that it's a great thing that Community of Christ Sings has such a wide diversity, and we've utilized content from other faith traditions and other people who are not Community of Christ people. But it means that there's a lot of content in there that Community of Christ does not own the copyright to. We got permission to use it in the hymnal, but that doesn't transfer on to be able to use it for other things. And so we can sing it in our worship services, but usually when you get beyond that, you probably will need additional permissions, either by using the reprint or streaming licenses. And if you're going to be doing something beyond that, then maybe contact our office, and we can see like if there are specific things that you're wondering about, we can check on it for you. But I'd start by looking at that spreadsheet on the website to see what things are covered by Community of Christ and what aren't, and what are covered by specific licenses, and see whether or not the congregation has that license that covers that hymn.
So the web page that you are referencing is seaofchrist.org/hymnal-tools. And I'll try to paste that in the comments if you haven't already, Parker. And on that page, the second section is titled Copyright Information. And so it includes that spreadsheet that David was referencing. So we'll get a link to that in the comments for you.
Thanks. Yeah, if you could post that, Becca, that would be great. And this next question is a bit more of a technical question that I think I might even be able to answer, but it says, how do you go dark with Facebook Live during the sharing of copyrighted materials? So I think the concern there would be that you might have to cut the whole live feed off to like start it back up again. My recommendation for that would just be to mute the microphone and then to share another screen, maybe like a hold screen that says like, we'll be back in just a few minutes or something like that. That way you can keep your live feed going, but they won't be able to hear anything. They'll know you're still broadcasting because you're still live, but it'll just be a shared screen. You could use a PowerPoint deck or something like that just to make a little thing that you could share too. So that would be my recommendation. You could also theoretically just go dark and go mute and turn it to a black screen, but people might get more confused with that. Anybody else have any other suggestions for that question?
I think that's a good way to handle it, Parker.
Okay. From Karen Randall, what if you were showing your YouTube videos from your own YouTube channel?
So I guess I'd need a little bit of clarification from Karen there. When she says her own YouTube channel, would she also mean that these are videos that she has created and has posted on her YouTube channel, or are these from third parties who are doing it? Because I think if it's your YouTube, like if you created the content, you can determine how you're using it. So if you have someone in the congregation who has created content, whether it's a YouTube video or otherwise, then yeah, I think you're okay to use it, because then you've given yourself permission. You don't need to sort of check with someone else. It's when you're using someone else's content. That's when you need to think about permission. So I'm not sure exactly on that question. If it's her video, then yeah, I think it's fine to use in the service. But even if it's your YouTube channel, if you are sort of pulling other people's content into it, even though it's your channel, you may have some issues there if you're showing it during your service. Good
answer. This one's kind of a comment, but also a question from Justin DeLong. Says, if I'm not mistaken, TED Talks allows nonprofits to use their videos. And that's a fair point. I'm sure there's lots of organizations out there that develop really good content that put a very broad, big statement out there that just says anybody can use this content. So I think if you're looking for good content, you might find good partners in organizations like TED Talks or other things like that you're just going to know any video that they put out I can use. Yeah, I think, and that raises, I think, a good point too, Parker, in that that's what works when you're thinking about these things ahead of time, and you have already kind of developed some techniques and ways to find content that is good, that you know is going to be used and is not going to present copyright issues. And so if that is kind of how something like TED Talks has done, that they're willing to let nonprofits use it,
then that might be somewhat place that when you're planning, when your worship planners are serving, you may, or planning the service, sorry, they may want to know, hey, you might want to go to TED Talks if you're looking for something to fill in here, because they say it's okay to use this, as opposed to just searching randomly on the internet and pulling down whatever video and using it, even if it fits really well. So I think having those resources to pull from it would be helpful. So appreciate Justin mentioning that.
Absolutely. From Holly Caskey, I've seen links for suggested videos in the worship helps. Can I assume these are okay to use?
That's a tricky one. We are trying with the resources that we're putting out to be more mindful of that and not leading people astray or creating traps for them with those. I was talking with a creators workshop a couple months ago, and we had this discussion about, hey, we need to know if you're saying to use a YouTube video, don't create a copyright issue for people so that they're using it. So I think I would be careful about that with that, and hopeful that that as future worship helps are coming out, that will be of higher priority for our worship creators.
And just to add to that, so obviously we've talked about it's okay to use and to share Community of Christ videos that you find on seaofchrist.org and on our YouTube channel. I know too that worships will sometimes point people to videos produced and released by leading congregations in mission. Mm-hmm. And that's also a Community of Christ entity. So those are okay to use as well.
A follow-up question to that going dark conversation with a live stream. We were advised that sharing a link to copyrighted material for Facebook Live viewers during a go dark time was the same as showing it. I think I heard you suggest that we could share the link as an alternative. We would like that alternative. Could you please confirm this is okay?
Well, I always like to please people. So yeah, so I will say that it's not an absolute yes, but it does seem like that linking is not as much of an issue as putting content on your site. So if you have on your website a link to content on another web page somewhere else, that is okay, probably. The courts haven't exactly ruled on it, so as a true lawyer, I can't give you a yes or no answer necessarily on it. But linking is probably okay. Putting what's on that other site on your site, that becomes the copyright problem. So in this context, if people are watching on Facebook Live and you just put up a link to some other material, say you're singing a hymn and you put up a link to where that content is located, and you have another choir or someone else that has posted their rendition of that song on there, and someone clicks on a link on their device, then that's fine. They're just navigating to that page on their device. We are not actually presenting that content to them, which is where the copyright violation could occur.
Gotcha. A follow-up question from Ashley Sabri. Does the church have any fact sheets or brochures or pamphlets on all of this information? I feel like I really need to see it in writing to keep it all straight and fully understand it regarding copyright sharing, etc.
Well, Ashley, it warms my heart as an attorney anytime anybody wants to see something in writing. So I appreciate that's your perspective there. We probably don't have like a fact sheet. You can find some of the information on the website, and so that's where you would find it in writing, is navigating to one of those pages and looking at the information there. If you still have questions after that, people should feel free to contact our office, and we can try and offer clarification and things on that. I know I've at least on a number of occasions responded to people who have said, I read everything on the website and I still don't understand what I'm supposed to do with my congregation. What can you tell me? And I've replied to them and tried to walk them through some of the things that for their congregation may work. Admittedly, sometimes we're trying to provide information to the worldwide church. It isn't always as specific as what's helpful in a congregational setting. So if people still have questions, feel free to contact us.
That's a great point too. I just kind of had this thought that something that might make more sense to people than, because there's a lot of if this then that sort of maybe probably, maybe just having some case studies of congregations of what is legal and what they are doing as examples to follow. That might be something that people would appreciate seeing. But anyway,
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
And I would say too, just as we're, I guess, a reference point for Ashley to kind of get started with her research. If you go to Sea of Christ, this is a URL that David mentioned earlier. So if you go to seaofchrist.org/copyright-law, the things that we talked about tonight, or at least many of them, plus more, will be found in that section of the website. So that's a good place for Ashley to start.
Good call there. I'm gonna have to call this probably our last question, and it's on photo releases. So can a family use one photo release form for all persons in the family, and can it have unlimited time authorization?
So potentially, I think that not seeing the form that's being used, it's hard for me to say one way or the other for sure. But I think you could have one that sort of lists out all the people, members of the family. Ideally, you would have multiple signatures. Like I think, like I couldn't, for example, sign for Parker and say, Parker, it's okay to use Parker's image. And I couldn't sign for Becca and I couldn't sign for Brittany, even if we were all four in a family, right? So I think that using it for a family may be okay, but you may need to have more than one signature on that photo release saying that the individuals. Now I understand that there are kids there, and so you may be signing for minors, which is kind of a different conversation. But certainly the adults would probably each need to sign for themselves, not just one person signing for everybody.
Thank you. Just a follow-up comment for all those who did not have their questions answered. We will list the link to the copyright law section again, as well as the email address for the Office of General Counsel. So if you still have a question that was not answered here, please feel free to connect with them or to look on the website and see if you can find an answer to your question.
Hey, Parker, is there any way that you can save the question queue and even forward that to me so that then we would at least have a sense of what some of the questions were and could offer information if we could find a way to do that. We won't be able to respond to people individually, but at least maybe then we'd be ready for when they did email in their question to the office.
Absolutely, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we'll make sure to provide you with a link so that you have that, David. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to finish us off here. At least one URL, if you know no others tonight, the one that we want to make sure that you're familiar with is seaofchrist.org/copyright-law. And then again, if you did not get your questions answered tonight, email legalservices@seaofchrist.org. I want to thank David for being with us tonight. We obviously had a great conversation, so many questions. Thank you guys on Facebook for joining us and sending in your questions too. I found this very interesting and definitely learned a few things. So thank you everyone for participating tonight. If you go to seaofchrist.org/connect, you will find a survey link there. And we would really appreciate it if you could take just a few minutes to complete the survey. It provides us with information about how these presentations went tonight and the other two that we did on Tuesday and Wednesday, and also gives us some direction about what future presentations you would like us to host. Your information is so valuable to us and really helps us put together content that you will find valuable. So again, that's seaofchrist.org/connect. You'll find the survey link there, and we appreciate you so much for taking the minute to do that for us. And with that, thank you. Hopefully we'll be seeing you again soon in a few months for some more Connect workshops. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Appreciate being here tonight, guys.